This week on the podcast, if you're thinking of buying a business in 2026, stay tuned as we give you 5 easy steps to assess it. Welcome to the Profit Cash Growth Podcast. This is the podcast for 6 and 7 figure business owners who are looking to grow a financially successful business. My co-host, Claire Hancock, is a finance director, chartered accountant and entrepreneur. And every week, I'll be exploring guidance and frameworks designed to help you increase your profits, improve your cash flow and grow your business. So, Claire, tell everybody how you're going to single-handedly reinvigorate the high street.
I didn't say I was going to reinvigorate the high street. Look, I just said, if I had all the money in the world and could do anything I wanted, I would take it upon myself to take responsibility for our local high street and trying to bring it back to a thriving state by helping business owners, paying for pop-up shops for new startups, holding startup markets, those types of things. And you completely poo-pooed it. But I mean, it's not a real dream, is it? Let's be honest. It's never going to happen, but it's nice to talk about things
I just
like
have a fairly strong view on the fact that I think this whole high street thing is like the world trying to like cling on to nostalgia in the past and not just accepting that like things evolve. And like, you know, the second a supermarket came out, that took out half the high street, and then the online supermarket came out, and that took out the other half of the high street. And I know you're like, we need it to be a destination, but I don't want to go into the centre of my town where it's really difficult to park, it's really busy to get into, the traffic's horrific. I want to go out of town, or I want to jump in a cab and go to, you know, somewhere that is easy to get to, which is exactly what we've kind of created. So I think we've already like replaced the high street. It's not like the high street's lost. We've replaced it with something else. Like all these out of town places have popped up, but people are like, oh, we must bring the high street back. And I just don't have that same like. I think it's very sentimental.
Look, I agree with a little bit of what you're saying about it being nostalgic and sentimental, but there is an element of, you know, if we ever go into town for like the Christmas light switch on or things like that, you bump into people and you see things and you make memories and things like that. And I just think there's way more to the high street than just the function of going to a place. It is about a community environment. It's about meeting people. It's about building relationships. There's so much more to it than just...
You can have that elsewhere. It doesn't have to be in the high street. And we do have that elsewhere.
But these other places don't have it because, for example, so you're talking about like Milton Keynes, we go to Escape. Escape is completely soulless. It's very functional. It's been laid out for exactly the right amount of space for people to walk versus retail space. There's a massive car park there. It's functional. There's no space where you're going to accidentally pop into your neighbour or something like that. So I think that high street is way more than just a functional place to go and do your shopping or spend your leisure time.
But don't people in their very nature, like with the digital world, like people don't want to socialise? Isn't that just another element to it?
No, I don't agree with that at all. I think the high streets are really, really important to the UK, and I think we should keep them thriving because you go to places like younger countries like America, like Australia, for example, that have never had high streets, and they build these community places where people go and they congregate and they do things together. So they've functionally built those places. Why can't we just convert our high streets into them?
Or do that elsewhere?
But we're not going to be doing them in shopping centres.
Why? That's exactly where Americans do it. So why wouldn't we do it?
Because it's not where Americans do it. That's not where they build those community spaces. They have separate community spaces where there's bars and play parks and all of that kind of stuff. And it's a completely different environment to a shopping mall. And what you're referring to as shopping malls.
I just think we should be focusing on solving this problem, but not necessarily focusing on the high street. So
yeah, well, we're never going to agree on this, are we?
No, we're not. Anyway, should we move on to this week's news story of the week? So this week, Claire, the news story of the week actually carries on from, do you remember the rotisserie chicken story we did the other week about Morrison's VAT battle on their hot chicken?
Yes.
Well, at the end of this story, there was a VAT quiz, which I thought was really interesting. You were like, do this to me on the podcast. I remember when we had it.
I'm quite sure I would have ever said that,
yeah,
but okay.
And
here we are anyway.
I thought it was fascinating because it's just like, it made me realise just like how nuanced the whole VAT thing with products was and how just like frankly borderline impossible it is for anybody to possibly know these things without having to look every single one up. So I thought, because I know how much you love a quiz, they would give you a little quiz live on the podcast on this one.
Great.
And also just to let people understand how difficult and how nuanced these things are. So question number 1 was, what is the VAT on Jaffa cakes?
Well, everybody should know this because of the famous Jaffa cake case. If it was a cake, it's non-vatable because for some reason cakes are seen as essential items. So,
okay, so is it
VAT.
Is it 0%, 10% or 17.5%?
Zero. Well, it's not 17.5%, it's 20%.
That's correct. A judge did rule that in 1991.
Because it's a cake. It goes hard when it goes stale, whereas biscuits go soft when they go stale.
Interesting. Question 2. What is the VAT rate on protein flapjacks? Is it 0%, 5% or
20%? I'm going to say 20%.
20%. It's correct. Mass-produced flapjacks contain protein powder, are traditional under the law, so require the full base rate of 20%. What is the VAT rate on mega marshmallows?
What's a mega marshmallow? Like just a big
large marshmallow. Is it 0%, 15% or 20%?
20.
20. Correct, mega marshmallows.
But if they were small marshmallows, they would be 0% because they're seen as a essential baking item.
Okay.
I think there's a specific case on that.
Well, let's find out, because question 4 is, what is the VAT rate on mini marshmallows?
0.
0. You are right. Mini marshmallows are considered by law for the purpose of baking rather than confectionery, therefore exempt from the levy.
Yep.
Question 5 is, what is the VAT rate on period pants? 0, 5% or 20%?
I'm going to say it's 20% because they're seen as a clothing item, but I imagine that this has been challenged.
It's not 20%.
0%.
It's 0. Yeah.
Interesting. Are they clothing or are they
VAT on period pants
items?
was scrapped in the 2023 autumn budget after a campaign by retailer M&S recognised them as an essential product, not merely clothing.
Well, it was a big thing, the whole tampon tax thing that came about, and Boris Johnson told everybody it was an EU rule and that when we left the EU it would be scrapped. So yeah, I'm not surprised on that one.
Question 6 is, what is the VAT rate on nicotine gum? Is it 0%, 5% or 20%?
Nicotine gum. 0% because it's seen as a medical item?
It's not. It's 5%. Smoking succession products have a reduced rate of 5%. Again, it's like a minefield, isn't it? Question 7. What is the VAT rate on a fur coat for a child?
Oh, so children's clothing would traditionally be 0, but there are very specific rules around fur. In particular, unless it's an exempt fur, which I think there's like some mink and some very rare goat or something like that means it would be 0 rated. But I'm thinking
just for listeners, this is truly how our tax system works. Like, you're not joking, because I know about joking, the mink. Yeah. There's one type of fur that's like a different.
I think because it's children's clothing, it would just fall into that category of being 0, regardless whether it's fur or not.
Okay. That's incorrect, unfortunately. It's 20%. Children's clothes and footwear are generally exempt from VAT, but if they're made from real fur, the full rate applies.
God, so all those rich people that are getting stung with the 20% VAT.
What is the VAT rate on loo roll? 0, 3 or 20%? 0, 3% or 20%?
3% isn't a VAT rate. So give me 5%.
No, it says 3%.
On loo roll? No, 20%.
20% is correct. It attracts the full one rather than an essential item. It's classed as a luxury good.
Wow.
Not an essential item. So there we go.
It's certainly an essential in our house where we ran out this morning.
Absolutely ironic, because the first thing that ran out during COVID that people went nuts for was loo roll. So how ironic that the most important thing in people's eyes is classed as a luxury item. That is, by definition, a problem in the tax system, isn't it?
Simon, we live in a world where tampons are classed as luxury items, and I can bet my bottom dollar
fat-free
that they were classed as luxury items before the law changed. That was why they were VATable. And I think if anybody that has ever had a period thinks that a tampon is a luxury item, then we can claim that our tax system is completely fucked.
Question 9. What is the VAT rate on caviar? 0, 10% or 20%?
I'm going to say 0 because it's a raw food item.
That's correct. Caviar is classed as essential foodstuff, so completely exempt from the levy. So loo roll, luxury, caviar, essential. Just so we're clear on the rules. And you wonder why people can't get this right. Final question was, what is the VAT rate of a live turkey? Is it 0%, 17.5% or 20%?
I'm wondering if it makes a difference why you're selling it. So if you're selling it for a pet, it would be a different VAT rate to if you're selling it as part of the food chain. So I'm going to go 0.
0. It's not right. It's 20%. With the sale of a live turkey standard rate, by the time they've reached supermarket shelves, they're exempt from VAT. I didn't even know they were exempt from VAT when they reached the supermarket shelf. Why is a turkey exempt?
I don't know why a turkey would be exempt and not 0 rated.
Shall we see your score?
Go on.
You did well. I said to you, didn't I, that if you did more than 50%, I'd be absolutely amazed, and you'd be a phenomenal accountant, because this is so ridiculously nuanced. And you scored 6 out of 10.
Oh, that's quite good. I'm pleased with that. What was the aim of this, Simon?
I just thought that listeners would just find it, like I found it, just fascinating just how ridiculous some of this stuff is, and therefore it's just for fun. Anyway, so did you have a comment? No. Are we moving on?
Moving on. Let's move on to the news story.
Let's move on to...
the deep dive.
Let's move on to this week. Wake up. I mean, I know it's a new year and it takes a while to get going, but here we go. No, this week we're going to talk about 5 easy steps to assess a business acquisition. So, Claire, why are we talking about this today?
Well, we do a fair amount of support for people looking to buy and sell businesses.
Yes.
And I often get even just our existing customers say, Claire, I'm looking at this business. Can you please have a look over it? And often I will come to a different conclusion to what the business owners come to, for example. And you can almost guarantee every time that I will come to a different conclusion to what the business broker that's trying to sell the business has come to.
Surprising.
So really, I want to share from an accountant's perspective, a finance director's perspective, what we're looking at when I get these come across my table, to enable the business owners to get that little bit of insight. So when you're looking at these businesses to buy, you're looking at IMs and things like that, you can maybe...
What's an IM? Sorry.
Information memorandum, which is normally the piece of like the documentation that will come from the business broker. So they'll normally send like a teaser, you sign an NDA, and then you'll get a bit more information from them. Information memorandum that's normally it looks like a fancy PowerPoint presentation, essentially. Have some information about the business in, normally some headline numbers, normally like an org chart, things like that. So when I get that IM, the type of thing that I'm looking at to understand whether this is a viable business or not for the person moving forward, because of course not everybody uses me as their accountant, and most accountants will be charging extra for this type of work.
You're joking. Surely not.
So what you don't want to be doing is constantly having to go to an accountant and paying them to do this assessment for you.
Yes.
You want to be able to have a look at these numbers and understand it yourself.
Especially because we talked, didn't we, last week, that one of the things this year is around the amount of opportunities that could cross your desk. So this gives you an idea of how you can quickly sort of vote in or vote out the opportunity before you then pass it to the accountant to do slightly more due diligence and back up your things. So this is the point in which you've signed the NDA, you've been given the memorandum, and you want to know, what are the quick 5 things that I can look at in this that will give me a feel for whether this is fundamentally a good business or a bad business. That's what we're going to do, isn't it? Perfect. Right, so let's start with the first thing that you look at, Claire, once you get that document.
The very first thing that I always start with is the cash in the bank versus the short-term liabilities. And what I'm really looking for is there just enough cash in this business to cover its day-to-day spending and its tax bills? That's really, really important. And the reason why I always do this is because often business brokers will put somewhere in the IM, business maintains a cash balance of X amount. Like I had one across my desk the other day, and it was the business maintained a cash balance of 500k in the bank. And I opened up the balance sheet and I said, well, by the time it's paid its VAT bill and its corporation tax bill, that 500k is gone.
Yeah.
So it's understanding, okay, if the business owner is personally taking all the excess cash as dividends, that's where that money's going. But what I'm trying to do is get a feel for, is there excess cash in this business or not? Is it generating cash over and above what it needs to survive? And
I'm guessing that most businesses aren't as due diligent as me and have a separate bank account that they put their tax money in, so it makes it really clear what their working capital is. So you've got to go through and work out what's their liability with their taxes so far, deduct that off the current cash balance, and then you can start to get a better feel for what cash is left in terms of, like, you know, I guess you look forward as to what they need to pay moving forward, and then therefore you can work out if they've got excess beyond that or whether they're just about getting by, so to speak.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Because most business owners that are selling, you know, generally you don't sell, as a general rule, you don't sell a really well-run business that can run itself without the owner being a part of it.
Yeah.
Generates a shit ton of cash every year. Like, those things just don't really exist in the small business buying world in reality.
Yeah.
So most people are selling their business because they've had enough of it, or they want to retire and they want out. And you can only retire from a job at the end of the day. So if you're coming into this, and as a business owner, if you've already got a business that you're running, and or you're not looking to buy yourself into a full-time job, there has to be excess cash in this business to make it worth your while.
I'll just pick up on something you said there, because I thought it was really, really important, which was you can't retire from a business, you can only retire from a job. And you're And that's a really, really good point, because I watched somebody else talking about this the other day who was talking about business sales and a client they had who really wanted to sell their business, but actually they were making like £1 million profit a year out of the business. And actually the issue wasn't they needed to sell their business. The issue was they needed to replace themselves. So the business ran itself. And actually at which point they were enjoying maybe £800,000 a year of the profits, but they literally spent 1 hour a month on their business in a board meeting. And that is a completely different type of business, isn't it, than, the vast majority of small businesses that are out there, which are, totally reliant on the person that owns the business. So.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's the first thing that I'll go and have a look at, because if there's no excess cash in this business, then essentially we're in a situation where 9 times out of 10, it requires the business owner to work in that business. It's probably not making enough profit to pay somebody else to replace the business owner. And therefore, we know immediately we're probably going to be looking at quite a difficult business to run and a requirement for the purchaser to have some cash reserves behind them.
Okay, perfect. So first of all, we're looking at that cash. The second thing we look at, Claire?
Adjusted EBITDA.
Okay, EBITDA is?
Earnings before interest, tax and depreciation.
And what does that really tell us?
So,
what is it telling us? What is EBITDA for?
Essentially, what we'll be looking at is your profit before depreciation, and
what's depreciation?
Is the write down of the assets that you own.
Okay.
And before interest. Now, the reason why we look at those two things is because the depreciation isn't actually a cost to the business. It's just like an accounting adjustment that we're doing.
Correct.
And secondly, we remove interest because most small businesses would be sold debt free. Okay. Normally, there's some sort of refinancing or something like that means the current debt that the business has doesn't exist or looks different post acquisition. So we kind of need to remove the debt and say that belongs to the current setup. Forget about that. We're going to have our own financing structure moving forward, potentially with a different interest charge.
Okay. Why would it look different, the debt? Because the debt, presumably you're buying the debt as well anyway. You're not going to get rid of it.
Well, in a lot of small businesses, the debt would be funded by the director, or it could be funded by intercompany loans, or it could be funded. The finance might be several years old and there might be some equity. So the new business owner might want to refinance to leverage more equity. So there's lots of reasons why people would refinance at the point of the deal. But just from the most simplistic reason why we look at businesses without debt is because most debt that small businesses have will have a personal guarantee on, and or will have a requirement in that says if the shareholding of the business changes, they could withdraw the finance.
Is it fair to say that it's to do with, well, it's a way of analysing a business's kind of operating ongoing stability and profitability? Once you strip those things out, that's the way I've often heard it described. It's the only way you can truly analyse
how you finance a business is a very personal decision from the business owner, essentially,
or the business model that's actually generating the P&L.
You could have the same business and I might fund it differently to you just because I have a preference for having loads of debt in the business, or another business owner might have loads of cash sitting in a bank account and they want to fund it themselves with a director's loan and not through finance from the bank. So there's it's a very personal decision how business owners fund their business, and that's another reason why we have to strip out all of the interest and look at the true operational activity of the business. The reason why we do such a deep dive on adjusted EBITDA is because this is the place that business brokers, business owners, when they're doing the IM, will make a business look potentially better than it is. Often they'll strip out things like the owner's salary, the current business owner's salary, and they'll say, well, the current business owner won't be working in the business anymore. And it's like, okay, but who is going to be working in the business then? Yeah. Or they will not adjust for the fact that the business owner's on that 12k a year tax efficient salary, and actually if you want to put a new MD in, they're probably going to be on more like 100k a year. So you really need to go over that adjusted EBITDA with a bit of a fine tooth comb. What we're trying to establish with the adjusted EBITDA, how much money is left over. Because the money that's left over is essentially what's available, subject to cash flow timing of when money actually flows in and out of the business. But as a general rule, the reason I'm looking at adjusted EBITDA is to establish, is there excess EBITDA? Because that excess EBITDA is what's available to pay debt.
Okay.
So most people buying businesses will be buying them with debt, and the aim is to try and get the business to take on the debt and to leverage the business as much as possible so you're not having to put your own cash in. And so therefore you have to have excess EBITDA and convert that into cash in order to repay any debt that you've got.
Okay, great. So the third thing that we do
is to have a look at the balance sheet.
Have a look at the balance sheet.
I want to see what we're actually buying here. You know, does the business have assets, like fixed assets, and is there any value to them? What taxes does this business owe? Are there intercompany liabilities? You know, for example, if there's a large liability owing to another business that's connected to this, it's like, why is that there? Has at some point that business injected cash in? How's that going to be repaid? All of these questions that then kind of start spinning off of that. But also, does it need a clean up? Like, you can often have a quick look at a balance sheet and understand how well this finance function is run. And therefore, that gives you an indication of how well the overall business is likely to be run.
Yeah.
Are there some anomalies? You look at these numbers and I just think, that's definitely not correct. That doesn't stack up for this business. That's not quite right. And that gives me an idea of, okay, actually, we probably can't rely on these finances. And what other information are we getting? The business owner or this IM that we also can't rely on.
Do you find that there's a correlation between how seriously they're taking the finances in their business and then the rest of the business, the way the rest of the business is run?
Yeah, 100%. It's the difference between people that are very much in the weeds, running their business day to day, sort of hands on the ground type of business operator versus a business owner that has got things together a bit more, maybe a bit more experience, got systems, processes,
putting the right people
digital
in place,
files, all those types of things. Yeah.
Great. Perfect. So that's number 3. Fourth thing that we do
is I want to look for what's wrong with the business.
Okay.
And the reason that I'm doing that is, firstly, I'm looking for some quick wins, some opportunities. You know, do we think that based off what I know about similar businesses, they might be overstaffed? You know, there might be some easy opportunities to cut some costs, increase the profitability of this business quite quickly, for example. Or I might look at something and say, do you know what? I know that all these other businesses that I work with that operate in the same model also sell this other product that is really profitable, and again, another quick win to really quite drastically change the model of the business.
So I guess a really good live example of this would be like an estate agency one that you had through recently, where literally the top line turnover was pretty much the number identical to my estate agency business, and you could quickly look down that P&L and they basically made no profit every year. But yet we know we run our own estate agency and we make great profits from it. And then we overlaid the fact that the volume and throughput that business was doing was probably a third of what we were doing.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden you can quickly go, my goodness, they are just fundamentally operationally running this too fast. Inefficient. So that you can immediately get a feel, because we've got heads in lots of different businesses. You know, somebody like you, this is where it really comes into its own when you look at these things for clients, is that somebody like you can look at that business and go, right, compared to X, Y, and Z that does work and does make profit, this is not right. So therefore we know what good looks like. We know we can achieve good. And as long as you've got the top line revenue there, like there is a blunt instrument theory, isn't there, that says, look, if the revenue's there and it's stable, what was beautiful about this business is the revenue was all there. It was immensely stable year after year after year. We know, and so therefore the last thing is we know we can run that business at a profit because we do it elsewhere. We've been there, done it, walked the walk, and that can be very powerful, can't it?
And I had another one come across my desk the other day. It was a self-storage business, and the person that was looking at buying it felt that they could improve the turnover to, I think it was around 200k. And I could immediately go into my system and say, well, do you know what? I've actually got 3 existing self-storage businesses turning over that sort of money. So I could say, well, they make this profit.
Yes.
Why do you think your profit's going to be wildly different? Because that's what this business owner was saying to me. They were thinking I can make X amount of profit. And I'm like, well, look, I've got 3 examples where they turn that over and they're not. The business owner is just making enough money to basically give himself a salary. What is it about this opportunity that you think would be different for you? And that's the kind of the wealth of experience that you would get by going to an accountant or somebody like that. Because if you can find an accountant that's got examples of those businesses that can, you know, obviously I can't share the exact information with them and say, here's their P&L. I'd never do that, but I could
the framework of that
yes.
business. I've seen another business or another few businesses that have the exact framework of this. They have this amount of assets. They have this lease. They have this amount of people, and they make this on this turnover. So I know that is possible, and therefore not only can you see the opportunity, but you can also dampen people's over exuberance, can't you?
Yes, 100%.
Which is really important.
So we're looking for two things here. We're looking for what currently in the business isn't really working and would be some quite quick wins, low-hanging fruit, because this is kind of the opportunity that you really want to pay a bit of a premium for, the goodwill, if you like. So, for example, if this business has never done marketing, then you could bet that they've probably got quite a good operational process, quite a good reputation, and therefore just bolting on a bit of a slick marketing system could really elevate this business to the next level. They're the types of things where we're thinking we're probably going to pay a little bit more for this business over something that
what we can do,
is already slick. But then the other thing we're looking at is risks. Where's everything that doesn't quite stack up or is likely to trip us up in the future? So the quality of earnings, is it repeatable? Have they had slow and steady growth throughout the years, or has the years been up and down? And is this year down or up on prior years, trends, all of that type of thing? And that's really what we're trying to understand, is how likely is this business to repeat its performance next year?
Yeah. Got it. Great. Perfect. So number 4 is look what's wrong with the business so that we can see the opportunities or temper the exuberance of the people buying it. So number 5.
Number 5 is we would then look at how it would integrate with what the business owner's wanting to do. Yeah. So often when you get an IM, the business broker obviously is a salesperson. They're trying to sell this business.
Of course, yeah.
And they'll be very optimistic with some of the things that they put in the IM. They'll often say things about the future, about things that are possible under the right owner. They'll use phrases like that.
Caveat. Yeah.
And it's like, whilst all of that is true, what you've got to be careful of is paying for a business based off what you're going to do with it, the skill set that you might bring or the opportunities that you bring to this business. So we want to understand how good we could make the existing business, what the opportunity is in the existing business versus what you're going to do with it, because they are two totally different things.
Yes. And I guess what you are capable of doing with it, what you're skilled to do with it, being honest about yourself, your team, your business, and your resources and your resourcefulness as to what you can actually do with this. Because they're always going to paint this kind of if Elon Musk took over this business, he'd do this with it. But you're probably not Elon Musk. Do you know what I mean? So it's what is your value that you add to that, and what would it look like when you integrate it with your value and potentially your other business's values?
So this is when we'd start to do some really high level models. Probably we'd just be looking at annual numbers at this rate. We might try and map out what the next 3 to 5 years under you could look like. And when I say high level, I'm talking about mapping out. We take the adjusted EBITDA, we'd add in any costs that you think could go in there, we'd take off any costs that you think could come out, and any increases in turnover that you could bring, that type of thing. But we'd be doing it on an annual high level basis. So I'm not talking about doing a detailed, complex monthly cash flow forecast or anything like that, just very high level. Where do you think you could take this business in 5 years? And do the numbers look realistic? Because if you're thinking, I'm going to increase turnover by £1 million by doing this, but the business is only £1 million to start with, do you really think you're going to double that business that quickly? Are your assumptions realistic? And do they stack up with the cost base? Do they stack up with the assets that this business has got? All of those types of things.
Yeah. Would you map it out with a sort of worst case, likely case, best case scenarios in these things? I just like that. I always love that model. We talk about this a lot when we're looking at stuff. We talk about, worst case, likely case, best case. And I just think it gives you a real, because if you can live with the worst case, then you could buy the business.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's what we're looking at really when we're doing that, is what would be the best outcome, the most likely outcome, and the worst outcome. So we're doing some stress testing. How many customers could we lose when the business sells? Or
because there's always disruption when the business change hands with people and customers.
How many staff could we lose? That's another really important thing to be looking at. If there's a couple of key members of staff in there and one of them goes, is that the person that's got all the relationships with the customers, and all of a sudden you're going to have no business? It's those types of things that would be modelling into that.
Brilliant.
So what we're really trying to establish when we do that model is essentially what could an offer look like? Because once we've done that, we'll have a rough idea based on the adjusted EBITDA, how much excess EBITDA there is that potentially could be used to finance a purchase.
Yeah.
We'd understand how much additional cash the business might be making on an annual basis, and therefore, any deferred consideration payments, day one payments, all of those types of things would come into it. And we would then be able to say, look, on a high level, this is what we think a deal could look like, which enables you to move to heads of term stage.
Great. And would you traditionally give two hoots about the price they're asking for it, or would you simply build your model up to what is the right price to pay for the business and then put forward that?
I don't think you can completely dismiss the price that's been asked, because
it's an asking price.
It's an anchor in somebody's mind at the end of the day. And so you have to be mindful of that. But at the same time, at this stage, we're trying to get to a number that we're comfortable with. We can't worry about how many other people are bidding on this. We can't worry about what the business owner thinks it's worth or what the business broker has said it's worth. We need to get to a number that we're comfortable stacks up from a financial perspective. And that's the main aim of what I'm doing, is trying to get to that point where we've got something that makes sense for the long-term viability of the business. Yeah,
because you're less dealing with kind of the other avenue of business, which is all about, which is far more strategical, which is actually, taking businesses out so your competitors don't get it, or what. There's a ton of other, but it's kind of outside of the size of business that, that we're generally dealing with. Because if you're a 1 to 10 million business, you're probably not making a really bold decision to take a competitor out. It's not really in your thing. So this is much more nuts and bolts. This is about getting something that's really going to work. It's going to be profitable. You can build upon it. You can stair-step your business in the right direction through acquisition, not make some, wild strategic move.
And not all offers are equal. An offer, if, say, for example, a business has got an asking price of £1 million, £1 million deferred revenue over the next 3 years based on EBIT targets being hit. Well, you've got your asking price, but okay, it's not guaranteed, number one, because it's based on performance over the next 3 years. And number three, it's not going to be paid out for 3 years. So that is not the same as having an offer of 800k as a day one all cash payment.
Yeah.
And so the way that the offer is presented, the terms of the offer, deferred revenue, whether there's earnouts, terms, conditions, what warranties you have to give, how long the business owner has to stay in the business, all of these things play into putting an offer together. You never ever just put a headline number forward and say, I'll pay you X amount for the businesses. Okay, under what terms? And that's the most important thing, because actually a lot of business brokers, unfortunately, are not speaking to the business owner about this when the offer comes to the marketplace. They'll value the business. 9 times out of 10, it's overvalued. And
of course,
they don't talk to the business owner about deferred consideration and earn-out periods and all of these types of things. Yeah. So often it can come as a shock to the business owner. And, it's a very deeply emotional journey that people go on when they're selling their business. And it's important to understand that as much as possible.
Great. Brilliant. Well, I think that's been super helpful, Claire, to give everybody just, you can see how detailed these processes are. And I think as soon as you're at the point where you've done a quick whiz through it, get it over to a really good accountant or a really good M&A specialist to do the next stage. But it gives you enough to be able to just lightly assess yourself the many opportunities that I'm sure are going to cross people's desks this year.
Yeah, absolutely. So just in case people are then thinking, well, what do I now go and buy the business? How does it work? What would happen? We'd do this initial high level modelling, and we would try and get to the point where we can put an offer in. And if that offer was accepted, then we'd move through to heads of term stage. And it's at that point that we would then start to do a far more detailed due diligence process, more modelling, cash flow modelling, things like that. So we can make sure that all of our assumptions are stacking up and that the terms that we've agreed around deferred payments, the finance facility that we're thinking about putting into the business, all of those stack up on a actual practical level from a working cash flow.
Brilliant.
So that would be the next step, that you will go far more detailed.
Great. Well, let's move on to this week's Profit Cash Growth Extra. So this week, Claire, I am putting Netflix reminders on my Profit Cash Growth Extra.
Yes.
I didn't know this was a thing. You told me to put it on here, didn't you?
I did, yeah.
So basically, if you see something in the coming soon section of Netflix, this sounds so simplistic, but I bet loads of people know about this, but I didn't. And you click on the coming soon thing and you click reminder, they email you when it comes out. I just thought that was really handy. This is a little bit like the old days when you would get the TV magazine and you'd have to ring the stuff that was coming up. This is like the modern version of that, isn't it?
Isn't it?
I never really thought about that. Yeah.
What Netflix, I think, really need to put in is like a diary, because if you're a business owner, you probably like live in your Outlook calendar. And I don't understand why there's not like a calendar where I can see the day that my favourite programmes, the next episode's released, when the new programmes that I put on my watch list are coming out. Like, I would just like to see a planner. But for now, we've got emails.
I have no idea how that even works, given the fact that TV just comes out on like a non-diarised basis. Like,
no, it doesn't. Like, if you subscribe to like a new season or something,
it doesn't come
normally
out at 8 o'clock on a Monday evening, does it?
It does.
No, it doesn't.
Like Pluribus, we were watching.
Very few. They do that sometimes. Very few do that where they'll only release it once a week just to try. I don't know why they do it, but 90% of stuff comes out and the whole thing's available. Like,
loads of stuff still comes out on a weekly.
No, it doesn't.
Calendar.
It's top. Apple TV did that like once or very occasionally, but most stuff they just release it and you just binge it. Anyway,
when you put stuff on your Netflix watch list, it will send you an email when it actually arrives.
Yeah. So thanks for joining us for another week's podcast. As always, if you feel like you might have outgrown your current accountant and you'd like to work with Claire and the team at Profit Cash Growth, nip over to the website. On there you can book a discovery call with Claire, and especially if you're thinking about looking at a business acquisition as part of everything else as well, then she could perhaps give you a few tips about that as part of the call. But yeah, do feel free to do that. Listen back through the podcast. Everything's evergreen as usual. Lots and lots of tips and tricks. And please just, if you know any business owners that are thinking about making a business acquisition this year, if you just copy the link to this podcast, drop it over on text to them and say, hey mate, I think you're really going to like this and it's going to add loads of value. Don't spend loads of money with your accountant until you've analysed it first yourself. And we will see you again next week.